In Mexico, citizens prepare to hold the first recall referendum on the presidential mandate. In Brazil, the workers' and socialist parties sealed the presidential duo of Luis Inácio Lula da Silva and Gerardo Alckmin for the October elections. And the Russian Defense Ministry said that the missile attack on Kramatorsk was carried out by a division of the Ukrainian missile troops from the locality of Dobroilie. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, from the TeleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Now we begin. In Mexico, citizens prepare to hold the first recall referendum on the presidential mandate. Around 93 million Mexican citizens are waiting for the 10th of April to be able to exercise their vote in the process promoted by the Mexican president himself. The National Electoral Institute, the INE, has made a statement in response to the uncertainty of Mexicans and indicated that it will install at least 57 polling stations for the electoral event due to the previous declarations by the entity, where it pointed out that the lack of supplies to hold a recall. It should be clarified that for the result to be binding, a minimum turnout of at least 40% of those registered on the electoral roll must be counted. Ecuadorian education workers will mobilize on Friday to demand that the national government respond to demands regarding salary and others. The call was made by the National Educators Union, in which they detailed that the rally will take place in the Park El Arbolito. A statement from the National Union of Educators that denounced that the Ministry of Economy and Finance promised to deliver information regarding the reforms of the organic law of intercultural education on the payment of teachers, and so far no government authority has presented any input. The teachers' organization assured that educators do not want more crumbs and demand that their rights be respected and fulfilled. In Peru, several social organizations and unions demonstrated in the streets of Lima to demand a constitutional reform and shut down the Congress. The Workers' General Confederation of Peru, the largest trade union in the country, called the march while the country is living days of tension after a strike of transporters, road blockades, and protests for the increase in fuel and food prices. During the protests, people demanded the closure of the Congress, led by the opposition, which they accused of obstructing the president's administration. In this context, the president announced over the weekend the elimination of the fuel tax and raised the minimum wage by 10% to ease the impact of soaring prices in the Andean nation. And with more than 7,000 arrests, the Salvadoran government continues to implement the state of emergency, with which it seeks to stop gang violence. Organizations denounce that the security forces are using the process to violate the human rights of citizens. The country's Attorney General's office reported that the biggest problem is the large number of cases of people being prosecuted who have nothing to do with the mass arrests made by the police and soldiers. As reported by the government of President Nayib Bukele, security forces had made some 7,467 arrests of alleged gang members. Specialists question the government's insistence on prolonging the state of emergency when those captured have not been brought to justice. They underline that while the tensions are increasing, human rights violations are also on the rise. In Honduras, the government created a new judiciary structure with a plan of restoring guarantees. President Xiomara Castro presented a document that states the need to create a new structure, given the fact that her report points out that around 70% of Honduras are living in poverty. For these reasons, the Secretaries of State for Women, Strategic Planning and Infrastructure and Transport have been created, in addition to the Secretariat of the Offices of Transparency and the Fight Against Corruption. This way, the current government eliminated 17 secretaries of the state created in the last 12 years by the National Party. In Guatemala, poor farmer movements and social groups end the third day of protests against corruption. They are also demonstrating against the process to select the country's new Attorney General. Our correspondent, Santiago Botón, brings us the details.
Representatives from farmers and social organizations marched through the main streets of the Guatemalan capital to protest against corruption and the re-election of Consuelo Porras as Attorney General of the Public Prosecutor's Office. We're asking for an end to corruption and impunity. Thanks to TeleSUR, the whole world will know that here in Guatemala there is a corrupt pact that refuses to leave and continues in power. They have come out to protest because they consider that there are anomalies in the ongoing election process to select a new prosecutor of the public ministry. And this is confirmed by a prosecutor who claims to suffer political persecution because of this case. Unfortunately, the members of the postulating commission have been co-opted, and they have stated that they are not going to take into account any challenging argument, and that has stirred the masses. Leaders of the farmers' movements warn that the outcome of the process to elect the country's general prosecutor could lead to poor observance of human rights. They want a prosecutor that may protect the corrupt, not just Jimmy Morales and Jean Mattei, but also those who are detained and in jail. That is a danger. The respect of human rights is at stake. March participants claim that they have been victimized by mining industry and the public ministries, such as the case of Bernardo Calzol, who was released from prison on March 25th this year.
For example, the Attorney General is not taking any action in favor of the natives' territories, but rather against those of us who defend such territories.
It was announced that on April 20th, President Alejandro Yamatei will be presented with a list of 6 candidates for him to choose the country's new Attorney General.
Santiago Botón, TeleSUR, Ciudad de Guatemala.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back from the South. The Brazilian Socialist Party on Friday officially nominated former Sao Paulo Governor Geraldo Alckmin to be the former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's running mate in this October's election. The announcement came after a meeting in Sao Paulo between the leaders of the PSB and Lula's Workers' Party. Lula stated the sealing of the agreement with Alckmin was a demonstration of the effort to build the best in Brazilian politics to win the 2022 elections. Alckmin, a center-right political veteran, is expected to ease concerns from business interests about a return to a left-wing government. The latest polls ahead of the October election showed far-right President Jair Bolsonaro gradually narrowing Lula's lead in the race.
Today is important to me. Alckmin, I'm sure that the Workers' Party will approve your name as our vice presidential candidate. This is what we need to fix Brazil. Alckmin's experience, my experience, and the commitments we will assume. Because it is important for the PSB to know that when the definition of Alckmin as vice president is finalized, you will participate in the elaboration of the government program.
And Brazil's state-run oil company Petrobras is at a crossroads with the removal of its CEO by President Jair Bolsonaro as he opposes fuel price hikes 6 months into his quest for re-election. The far-right leader fired the oil giant's CEO, Joaquim Silva Eluna, on March 28th after calling fuel price increases of 33% on average in the last year a crime against the population. Also, his main rival in the October elections and favorite in the polls, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, promised to intervene if he wins in the escalation of prices. In Datafolha High Institute survey in March revealed that 75% of Brazilians hold the president responsible for the soaring inflation fueled in large part by fuels. Silva Luna told a weekly magazine Veja that he suffered pressures from the president to contain prices. And the History Congress continues in Venezuela, a space to foster knowledge and understanding of the facts that contextualize the current regional and world situation. One such fact is the 2002 coup d'etat against President Hugo Chavez. From that moment on, the United States put into practice a strategy to overthrow popular governments. Madeleine Garcia has the story.
This is not just any carpentry workshop. Here, young people are taught to make wooden pieces that are used to restore the historical center of La Guaira, which is 30 minutes away from the capital city. They help to rescue the memory, the history of the people of the plains.
The idea was to unite society for the sake of history. We can all learn by doing, which is the slogan of this community school.
And it is in this place where the 10th Congress of History takes place, a congress held annually in Venezuela to bring together teachers, historians, researchers who leave the academies to meet again with the protagonists of the insurgent history, those opposing resistance to colonialism.
People here are making presentations relating stories from their own communities, and that is very important because they are exposing insurgent stories that recover the historical memory of the people, as opposed to the history that have been taught academically, a history taught from an hegemonic point of view. And here we meet with all these people who are building history from the grassroots.
Liberating history to achieve independence, that is what this Congress is about, the decolonization of the mind.
We have a mental colonization, and that is achieved through the media. We are not given explanations, we are induced. This is what we think, and that is what you have to think. Then, obviously, the bad guy in the movie is Russia. The good guy is the United States, because we are under the control of that nation. That is why this Congress is very important, because it is focused on mental decolonization, a colonization done through the media.
It was the media that conspired to overthrow Commander Hugo Chavez for 48 hours in 2002, a strategy used by the United States to prevent the progress of processes that awake consciousness and change history, as Venezuela did and keeps on doing.
From the academia, we're being accused of pushing an ideology of history. And one can only wonder what is it that they have been doing for almost 200 years, if not managing the memory of a people, if not trying to align the historical conscience of the people, and somehow they have succeeded in furthering their historical project, the project of the Venezuelan bourgeoisie that was born at the same time as the Popular Project was born. In times of independence, two historical projects in confrontation until today.
From this Congress, the new narrative for history is being constructed based on facts and truths.
One realizes that history has changed, that the historical subject have changed, when it is possible for them to exercise power. In the history of Latin America, no other people was ever able to reverse a coup. Never before a people was able to restore revolutionary power. Every time a coup overthrew a revolutionary government, and even a progressive government, it was necessary to start the process all over again, to subvert the process while it's happening, to reverse the state of affairs while the people are in power. It is only possible if the people are capable of reversing the course of history. That's the way things have worked over time.
This Friday, this Congress of Knowledge wraps up, but they are already preparing for next year's edition, taking into account current world geopolitical events.
Madeline García, TeleSUR, Estado La Guaira, Venezuela.
Now we move on to other topics. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, signed the East African Community Treaty on Friday in a ceremony marking the formal admission of his country into the trading bloc. Heads of state from the bloc attended the ceremony at the State House, the official Nairobi residence of the President of Kenya. Chairman of the East African Community, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta welcomed the country to the bloc's customs union and common market and emphasized that the need to ease business restrictions across borders. The Congolese head of state said the move will help consolidate the exploitation of economic assets of the member countries and will boost opportunities for their populations. Also present in the ceremony were Ugandan and Rwandan presidents Yoweri Museveni and Paul Kagame.
To my brother and friend, President Tshisekedi, and to the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we welcome you to the East African Community Customs Union and the East African Community Common Market. These two are the signature pillars of our community and the foundation upon which the social, political, trade, investment, and economic interests stand.
In effect, this membership contributes to the consolidation of the exploitation of the economic assets at our respective countries and to our population's access to the opportunities offered by these reinforced cooperation.
In Kenya, years of unchecked exploitation inflicted terrible damage on the mangroves, mudflats, freshwater pools, and sandy dunes at the mouth of the Sabaki, the second largest river in that nation. Now, communities are replanting the shrubs. For generations, villagers living near the Sabaki estuary had relied on its natural bounty for lumber and firewood, fresh water, seafood, farming land, and plants for traditional medicine. The coastal wetland is also a resilient ally in the face of a changing climate, storing carbon, filtering water pollution, and protecting against extreme weather and rising sea levels. But years of unchecked exploitation inflicted terrible damage on the mangroves. Mangrove wood was chopped down to feed the construction in fast-growing coastal towns like nearby Malindi, a popular tourism hub. One tree at a time, local villagers are bringing the estuary back to life. For local communities, there are economic benefits in rehabilitating nature.
So the point at which we've got to now, globally, in Africa, in Kenya, or just looking at the Kenyan coast, is the population density is very high already, and the amount of resources that have already been extracted by fishing, by clearing vegetation, by cutting wood for charcoal or for construction and things like that, is we are already at an ecosystem or environmental deficit right now. So we can only benefit ourselves and nature by restoring ecosystems right now.
A lot, but for the mangroves, the ability to bounce back and come back and colonize the areas they used to be in the past is quite encouraging.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. At least 39 people, including 4 children, have been killed and nearly 100 wounded in a rocket attack on a railway station in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine. Donetsk Governor Pavlo Kyrylenko revised an earlier estimate of 30 killed and said many of the 87 wounded were in a serious condition. According to the statement from the Donetsk Regional Defense, the Ukrainian military carried out the attack when they were preparing to evacuate the civilian population, an operation that had already begun. After the violent attacks, many people went to this train station, some said to help the wounded, others to leave the city. Ukrainian presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich claimed that Russian troops attacked the area with an Iskander missile. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky repeated the accusation against Moscow, but claimed that it was with a Toksha-U missile. And the Russian Defense Ministry reported that the missile attack on Kramatorsk was carried out by a division of the Ukrainian missile troops from the locality of Drobopolye, 45 kilometers from the city. The ministry also said that the Toksha-U tactical missiles, the remains of which were discovered near Kramatorsk railway station, are only used by the armed forces of Ukraine. According to the Russian military, the aim of this offensive was to prevent the mass evacuation from residents from the city in order to use them as human shields to defend positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, as in many other cities in the country. And the Russian Defense Ministry accuses Kiev of carrying out a deadly attack on a railway station in the city of Kramatorsk in the eastern Ukraine that claimed dozens of lives. The Russian military stated that the aim of this offensive was to prevent the evacuation of residents from the city, to use them as human shields to defend positions of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Ukraine attacked the railway station in Kramatorsk with a Toksha-U tactical missile. Tactical missiles Toksha-U, the fragments of which were found near the Kramatorsk station, are used only by the armed forces of Ukraine. During the special operation, 8 Ukrainian Tochka-U launchers and about 90% of the missiles from the arsenals were destroyed. However, the threat of Kyiv regime continuing provocations and the rocket attacks on civilian settlements remains high.
As Russia cuts interest rate, the ruble settles despite the sanctions. Russia's central bank has managed to stabilize key aspects of the economy with severe controls. That became evident as the bank said Friday that it was lowering its benchmark interest rate and said more rate cuts will be on the way. The decision indicates that the strict capital controls and other measures are stabilizing Russia's currency and financial system despite severe pressure from the US and the European sanctions. The ruble fell from 79 to the dollar on February 23 to as low as 139 to the dollar, but it has since recovered to around 77 rubles to the dollar. Since an initial round of sanctions over Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, the Kremlin has tried to insulate its economy from financial penalties by encouraging companies to source parts locally and banning food imports from Europe to encourage local production. And Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Friday that Russia-Ukraine talks are not proceeding easily, but Moscow will strive to achieve all goals. The head of Russian diplomacy also advocates for the inclusion of Belarus in the list of Ukraine's security guarantors.
My colleague and friend how the negotiating contacts between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations are developing now. They are not proceeding easily, but we will strive to ensure that all the goals of these negotiations are achieved. We propose that the Republic of Belarus would certainly be among such warrantor states. Now all these issues, including the full list of warrantor countries, are being coordinated, but we stand for Belarus to be among them.
And Russia announced on Friday that it can place on other markets the coal Europe stops buying from it due to the anti-Russian sanctions. The statement was made by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov after the European Union's decision to ban imports of Russian coal and other solid fossil fuels as of August 2022. Russian coal imports to the European bloc amount to present to 8 billion euros a year. However, Western sanctions continue to increase, making Russia the country most punished by these coercive measures. More than 5,400 restrictive measures have been activated against Russia since mid-February. And in China, the first train left for the European continent, specifically for Moscow, to deliver more than 1,300 tons of goods. This year's first train left the port of Manzhouli in Chifeng city in the Mongolian Autonomous Region for Moscow on Wednesday, boosting rail trade between the two countries. The train was carrying 50 container loads of lysine sulfate, hydrochloride, and other products worth 12 million yuan, equivalent to $1.88 billion. Analysts see the rail link as an important component in promoting the Belt and Road Initiative. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.